As president of Next Gen America, and Mara Gillespie, former advisor to former Representative Adam Kinzinger and Speaker John Boehner. First, I want to ask you, Christina, how big of an impact, if any, do you think these protests will have? I know people have been frustrated, people have wanted to get out and do something, but will this actually have an impact on policy, or is it not necessarily about that?
Look, I think we've seen an unprecedented overreach, a power grab by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And ultimately, I think the only thing that's going to stop that is the power of the people demanding that government serve its people and stop slashing government, start making sure we protect Medicare, Social Security. People have been itching and desperate to show their muscle in the streets. I think this is going to energize progressives, Democrats, also independents that are incredibly frustrated and angry at what they're seeing. And that's why you saw over 1,200 events organized across the country. I think this is only going to build momentum to put pressure, not just on Donald Trump and Republicans, but we're seeing Democrats start to act like Cory Booker and other people speak up. They want the party to fight against Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And so I think that fighting spirit is just going to continue to grow with this.
Mara, how should Republicans perceive these protests? Because, you know, studies and polls are showing that pretty much across the board, most Americans are not on board with the tariff chaos. They're not necessarily on board with Elon Musk and his chainsaw approach to the federal government. Could these protests be hitting home and reaching across the aisle? And how should Republicans react to them?
Well, it certainly should be. And I don't think that they should be viewed as solely just this is a Democratic movement, because in reality, I do think a large chunk of the American population is frustrated with both parties. We were let down this past election by both parties. The Democrat had too of an insular circle around Joe Biden and refused to see the reality on the wall there. And then, you know, these protests are against Trump and Elon. Republicans who are more in the moderate space or just level-headed, pragmatic thinkers should take an opportunity to step forward with a plan, because there's not necessarily a plan on the Democratic side. Yes, Cory Booker, what he did the other night, gave some galvanizing to the Democratic Party to say, okay, let's take a stand. But they have to be for something. You know, just being against Trump and against Elon, that's a start, but that's not going to win them an election. We've seen the anti-Trump rhetoric not necessarily be fruitful for Democrats. So I think this is an opportunity for Republicans to also recognize that their constituents are angry. This isn't going to impact Donald Trump. He's a lame duck president. This is not going to affect Elon Musk. He's not an elected official. The people who are at risk here are the people who are sitting in the current seats in the House and the Senate, who are looking up ahead for re-elections and for midterm elections. They need to be concerned.
Christina, do you see signs of life from Democrats this past week? You know, you had the win in Wisconsin, you had Cory Booker's, we just mentioned this marathon filibuster, you've got protests today. You know, but to Mara's point, Democrats have to be for something. They have to get their messaging together. Are you seeing some sort of solidification within the party? Do you think they're going to be able to do that?
Yeah, and I think Mara and I actually really agree. I don't think it's enough just to oppose Donald Trump and Elon Musk, that ultimately people voted for Donald Trump because they are in deep economic pain in this country. And what I see on both sides of the political aisle, people are fed up with what they see as legalized political corruption. And what we saw play out in our system in Wisconsin was Elon Musk poured millions and millions of dollars, and he still couldn't win that Supreme Court race. But ultimately, we have to get the influence of billionaires out of our political system, because it is clearly hindering our ability to wrestle with the big issues and economic issues of our time that Americans care about, of all political persuasions. The fact that we don't have universal health care, the fact that the majority of Americans don't have more than $1,000 in savings for an emergency. These are the reasons people are swinging from one party to the next. And ultimately, who answers the deep economic pain of Americans will win their vote. I think Democrats have better prescriptions. But one thing that I think really failed in 2024 was Harris not speaking enough to the economic pain and conceding the economy to the right. We should never concede the economy to the right. We have real prescriptions to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, to protect unions, to tax the rich. These are all incredibly popular policies. We need to own them and run on them and not hide from them.
Mara, on a slightly different note, we were just talking to Peter Baker and our other panelists about this, but a White House official told the Washington Post that Trump is, quote, at the peak of just not giving an F anymore. You know, the hit to the economy, the backlash to Musk and all of the cuts. Do you think any of this will phase him? And do you think Republicans, those people you were just talking about, moderate Republicans, level-headed politicians, will start to speak up more given the pushback they're seeing from the public at large?
They should, because Donald Trump does not care what happens necessarily to the economy. He's not going to be impacted when you can't buy bananas at 49 cents anymore. That's not going to impact him, right? That's not going to impact somebody like Elon Musk. They don't feel the same that everyday voters feel, right? That's not their top concern.
Right.
And like I mentioned before, he's a lame duck president, so it's not as huge of an impact. But Republicans who are in their seats right now, and again, I also don't think that the president necessarily cares whether or not the people keep their seats or not. What he cares about is when they go against him, when they speak out against him, when they stand in his opposite, in his way. Rand Paul joining with Tim Kaine this week on the Senate floor, opposing the tariffs on Canada. That to him, that's going to bother him. And so there is an opportunity here. And I think a lot of it does happen behind the scenes, people expressing frustrations, although I do think a lot of it falls on deaf ears. But that's going to be, tactic one would be to talk behind closed doors, try and get someone who has his ear to say, this is a real problem for our reelection, for you to have any say, as far as having majorities in Congress. And then secondarily, speaking up and out, because they're the ones whose election and their jobs are on the line, not the president's.